All right, deep divers, buckle up. Today we're tackling a question that's probably crossed your mind at least once. Is TikTok secretly turning our brains into mush? I'm talking about the whole brain rot phenomenon. That feeling like you've just spent hours scrolling through pointless videos and your brain is now officially fried.
What's interesting is that brain rot actually became a thing. Oxford even named it their word of the year for 2024, defining it as that supposed mental decline from overdosing on mindless online content.
And now there's this brand new study out of China from Tianjin Normal University using brain scans to look at what's actually going on out there when people get sucked into the world of short videos.
They studied over 100 undergrads using brain scans and questionnaires to get a handle on their short video habits. Some of the statements on the questionnaire were pretty intense, like, my life would feel empty without short videos. Or even not being able to watch short videos would be as painful as losing a friend. The participants rated how strongly they agreed with statements like these.
And get this, the students who are basically glued to those short videos, the ones who felt like their lives depended on them, actually showed some pretty noticeable differences in their brain structure compared to the students who were less attached. I mean, that's kind of freaky, right?
It is intriguing. The researchers found more gray matter in two key areas of the brain, the orbitofrontal cortex, or OFC, and the cerebellum. The OFC is located right behind your forehead, and it plays a crucial role in decision-making and regulating emotions.
The more gray matter in the OFC, what does that actually mean for someone who can't stop watching TikToks?
Well, think of the OFC as your brain's control center for balancing immediate rewards with long-term goals. Like, let's say you're craving a big piece of chocolate cake. But you should probably stick to your diet. Your OFC is the part of your brain that helps you decide whether to indulge in that delicious cake or go for a run instead. The researchers are suggesting that the increased gray matter in the OFC of those who are heavily into short videos might mean they're more sensitive to the quick bursts of reward and stimulation that come with each video.
So basically, their brains are getting wired to crave those dopamine hits, like those perfectly timed jump scares, or those satisfying ASMR videos.
That's one interpretation, yes. And then there's the cerebellum, which is located at the back of the brain, and traditionally associated with movement and coordination, but it also has a role in emotional processing. The study found increased gray matter there, too.
Wow. So it's like TikTok is training our brains to become little dopamine-seeking machines. It's a cycle. You get a hit, you crave more, you watch more, your brain changes. It's kind of terrifying.
Now, hold on. It's crucial to remember that this study is just observational. We can't jump to conclusions about cause and effect here. Just because they found a correlation between being attached to short videos and these brain differences doesn't mean one caused the other. There could be other factors at play.
Okay, good point. Correlation doesn't equal causation, right? We've all heard that a million times. But wait. There's more to this study, isn't there? They did a second brain scan where things got even weirder, right?
Yes. During the second scan, the participants rested with their eyes closed, and the researchers noticed something quite interesting: greater synchronization of brain activity across several areas.
Okay, break that down for us. Which brain areas are we talking about? And what could that increased synchronization mean in terms of TikTok use?
The biggest increases in synchronized activity were in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and the posterior cingulate cortex. Now, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is essentially your brain's CEO. It's in charge of things like self-control, planning, and focusing your attention. And the posterior cingulate cortex is all about self-reflection and processing your internal thoughts and feelings.
So if those areas are more in sync with each other, in people who are really into short videos, could that mean they have a harder time tearing themselves away from TikTok? And maybe they're more prone to comparing themselves to others, like all those picture-perfect influencers?
Those are some of the questions this study raises. They're suggesting that this heightened synchronization in those brain regions might be linked to difficulty disengaging from videos and an increased tendency for social comparison while watching those videos. Constantly measuring yourself against what you see on the screen. And don't forget about that envy angle they found.
Right. They found a connection between what they're calling video addiction, these brain differences, and higher levels of envy. So could it be that feeling envious is actually pushing people to watch more and more? And that, in turn, leads to these brain changes. It's like a vicious cycle.
It's certainly a fascinating idea. But before we get too carried away, it's important to put this study into perspective. We need to remember that every time a new technology comes along, it seems to spark these anxieties about its effects on our brains.
Oh, absolutely. Like, remember back in the day when everyone was freaking out about Google ruining our ability to think deeply?
Exactly. Nicholas Carr even wrote that famous article, Is Google Making Us Stupid?, where he claimed he felt like he could no longer focus on long pieces of writing. And then you had Susan Greenfield, the neuroscientist who went on this whole crusade about mind change and the supposed dangers of video games and the internet.
She even wrote a dystopian novel about it, right? Where everyone's brains are basically fried from too much tech.
Yes, but here we are years later, and our brains haven't turned to mush. So is there any real scientific evidence to suggest that these short videos like TikTok are uniquely bad for our brains? Well, Peter Etchells, who's an expert on the psychological effects of digital technology, says no. He argues that there's just no solid scientific backing for that claim.
Okay, so maybe we need to take a deep breath and not jump to conclusions. But let's be honest, this new study definitely raises some eyebrows. So let's dig into its limitations a bit. What are the major flaws we need to consider before we hit the panic button?
Well, for one thing, it's a cross-sectional study, which means they only looked at these students at one specific point in time. There's no before and after comparison to determine if TikTok actually caused these brain differences or if those differences were already there to begin with.
Right. So we can't say for sure that TikTok is the culprit. What else? Give us the dirt on the study's weaknesses.
Another issue is that they basically scanned the entire brain looking for any differences, which, statistically speaking, increases the likelihood of finding false positives. These are basically random differences that don't actually mean anything. And even if we accept that the brain differences they found are real and somehow related to TikTok use, trying to interpret what those differences mean is a pretty speculative endeavor.
Like that increased brain synchronization they talked about. They called it REHO.
Exactly. REHO itself isn't necessarily good or bad. Some studies have actually linked it to positive things like meditation and improved cognitive function. So more REHO doesn't automatically equal brain rot.
Okay, so maybe it's not as doom and gloom as they're making it sound. Anything else we should be aware of?
Well, perhaps the biggest red flag with this study is that they relied on a measure of short video addiction that isn't a clinically recognized disorder. It's based on a questionnaire, which might not accurately capture the complexities of how people interact with these platforms. Someone might score high on that scale, but have a perfectly healthy relationship with TikTok. We have to be careful about throwing around terms like addiction without solid evidence.
So to sum it all up, this study doesn't give us any definitive proof that TikTok is rewiring our brains for the worse. We definitely shouldn't be running around screaming brain rot just yet. But it does make you think, doesn't it? It really does. I mean, even if we can't blame TikTok for literally melting our brains, it's still kind of hard to shake that feeling sometimes, you know? Like you finish a TikTok binge and you're like, what did I just do with my life?
I think a lot of people can relate to that, but if we step back and look at the bigger picture, I think the real takeaway here isn't about brain changes, but about healthy media habits in general.
So instead of freaking out about whether TikTok is shrinking our hippocampus or whatever, we should be more concerned with how much time we're spending on it and what we're actually getting out of it.
Exactly. Sure, spending hours passively scrolling through silly videos might not be the most enriching use of anyone's time, but let's not get swept up in the whole brain rot hysteria. It's about finding a balance and being mindful of how we're interacting with these platforms.
I love that mindful media use. It's like instead of letting TikTok control us, we need to take control of our TikTok experience.
Precisely, and that's where Peter Etchells' suggestion comes in. He argues that this whole discussion should be a chance for us to reflect on our own personal relationship with technology.
So it's like a personal tech audit. Like, take a good hard look at your screen time and ask yourself some tough questions.
Exactly. Ask yourself, am I actually happy with how I'm spending my time online? What benefits am I getting from it? What are the downsides? What are some things I might want to cut back on? It's about being honest with yourself and making conscious choices.
I think a lot of people might be surprised by what we discover. When they really start paying attention to their tech habits, it's easy to fall into these mindless scrolling loops without even realizing it.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the amount of time we're spending, but the quality of that time. Are we using these platforms in ways that are meaningful and fulfilling? Or are we just passively consuming whatever pops up on our feeds?
Right. It's like, are you using TikTok to learn new things? Connect with people who share your interests. Express your creativity. Or are you just letting it suck you into this vortex of random videos that ultimately leave you feeling empty and drained?
That's a great way to put it. It's about taking an active role in shaping our digital experiences, rather than being passive consumers. We have the power to decide how we use these tools and what we get out of them.
It all comes back to that idea of mindful media use, right? It's about being aware of how these platforms are affecting us, both mentally and emotionally, and making conscious choices that align with our values and goals.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And, even if TikTok isn't actually turning our brains into mush, it does serve as a valuable reminder to be mindful of all the media we're consuming, not just short videos.
Absolutely. I mean, think about all the other stuff we're bombarded with every day. News, social media, streaming services. It's like we're constantly swimming in this ocean of information, and it's hard to know what's actually sinking in and impacting us beneath the surface.
It really is. And that brings us to a really important question that I want to leave our listeners with today. If TikTok isn't uniquely rotting our brains, what about the broader media landscape we engage with every single day? What subtle influences are shaping our thoughts and behaviors without us even realizing it?
That's a really good question. And it's not just about the obvious stuff, like the news we watch or the social media feeds we scroll through. It's also about all those subtle messages we're bombarded with in advertising, in movies, even in the music we listen to.
It's like we're surrounded by these invisible forces that are constantly shaping our perceptions of the world and influencing our decisions without us even being aware of it.
It's kind of creepy when you think about it. Like, are we really in control of our own thoughts and beliefs? Or are we just products of our media environment?
Well, I don't think it's quite that black and white. We still have agency and the ability to think critically. But it's important to be aware of these influences and to develop strategies for navigating them effectively.
So how do we do that? How do we become more mindful and discerning consumers of media?
One important step is to diversify our media diets instead of just sticking to the same sources and platforms all the time. Try branching out and exposing ourselves to different perspectives and viewpoints.
So like if you're constantly watching cable news, maybe try reading some long-form journalism from a variety of sources. Or if you're always on TikTok, maybe check out some educational YouTube channels or listen to some podcasts.
Exactly. It's about challenging our own assumptions and biases by seeking out information that might contradict what we already believe.
And it's also about being critical of the information we're taking in, right? Like not just blindly accepting everything we read or hear, but actually questioning the source, the agenda, the potential biases.
Absolutely. We need to be asking ourselves questions like, who created this content? What's their purpose? What are they trying to persuade me of? And what information might be missing from this story?
It's like becoming a media detective, always looking for clues and piecing together the bigger picture.
Exactly. And remember, just because something is presented as fact doesn't mean it's necessarily true. We need to be skeptical and do our own research before forming opinions.
So much good advice here. It sounds like mindful media use is really about taking an active role in shaping our own understanding of the world, instead of just letting the media do it for us.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And I think that's a great place to wrap up our deep dive into the world of TikTok and brain rot.
So as we sign off today, let's leave our listeners with this thought-provoking question. Even if TikTok isn't single-handedly turning our brains into mush, what about all the other media we're consuming every day? Are we being mindful of its influence on our thoughts, our beliefs, our behaviors? Or are we letting it shape us without even realizing it?
It's something to think about, for sure. The more we understand about how media works and how it can impact us, the better equipped we'll be to navigate this complex landscape and make informed choices about the content we consume.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of media and the brain. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and keep those minds engaged.